The wind tore through the broken shutters, carrying a scent of rot and wet earth. I hadn't even stepped fully inside the farmhouse before I heard it, a slow, deliberate thump from upstairs. The floor groaned beneath the weight of something or someone moving with intent. I froze. My boots pressed against the warped wooden floor, each step echoing unnaturally in the hollow space. The house leaned like a corpse, swallowed by ivy and fog. Cracked windows stared down at me, empty eyes that seemed to judge. Another thump. This time, closer. My pulse quickened, hands slick with sweat. I fumbled for the flashlight in my jacket pocket, fingers trembling. I had come for quiet, for solitude, for a place to write. The ad called it charming, untouched, rustic. Untouched, yes, by anyone human in decades. Then it stopped. Silence. Thick, heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my ears. And then a whisper, soft, drawn out, almost drowned by the wind. Down. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The porch beneath me creaked as if echoing the warning. The wind twisted through the broken roof tiles, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. Something was here, patient, watching, waiting, and I had already crossed its threshold. The farmhouse smelled of mold, old wood and something sour I couldn't name. Dust floated in the shafts of light piercing through broken shutters, catching in my eyelashes and coating everything in a fine gray layer. Each step on the warped wooden floor groaned under my weight, a protest against my intrusion. I set down my bag carefully, trying not to disturb the silence. The living room was a museum of decay, wallpaper peeled in wide, curling strips. The patterns of once cheerful flowers faded to a pale, ghostly gray. Ceiling beams sagged as though tired of holding themselves together. I ran a finger across the cracked mantelpiece, leaving a streak of dirt behind. Charming, I muttered to myself. But the word felt wrong in this place. I explored slowly, flashlights sweeping across every corner. The kitchen sink dripped, each drop echoing like a heartbeat in the empty house. Cabinets hung crooked. Drawers resisted my fingers, sticking as if they remembered the hands that once used them. Then I heard it again, the thump upstairs. Slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. I froze mid-step. My pulse leapt into my throat. "Hello?" I called softly, voice cracking, swallowed by the house. Nothing answered. Only silence, thick and pressing, and the faint echo of wood settling. Or so I told myself. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Old wood, rats, a draft. Anything but what my mind hinted at in fleeting, panicked moments. But the air felt heavier here, colder. Shadows stretched just slightly too long. A door creaked open by itself, then stopped. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs like a warning. By evening, the farmhouse had begun to wear on me. I unpacked my small supplies, lit a single lamp in the living room, and tried to ignore the sense of being watched. The isolation was total. Fields stretched outward in every direction, overgrown and unkempt. The collapsed barn leaned dangerously. The old silo stood like a crooked sentinel. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and I felt the house holding me within its boundaries. I pulled out my notebook, intending to write, but the words felt hollow. The air seemed to absorb them before they could form. The shadows clung too close. The wind whispered in corners, and I began to notice small changes. A chair slightly turned. A book moved, faint scratches along the floorboards. "Who's there?" I asked one afternoon, voice trembling. Silence answered, punctuated by a soft, deliberate thump above. I realized I could no longer ignore it. The second story called to me an unspoken demand. Something waited there, something that did not belong to the living, something patient, something aware of my presence. I spent hours listening, scribbling down the oddities, the floorboard that squeaked without cause, the whispering drafts, the cold spots in the corners of rooms. At night, I slept on the couch, light spilling across the floor like a fragile shield. Every thump above stole my breath. Every shadow seemed to move with purpose. Sometimes I imagined footsteps pacing above, counting softly. 1, 2, 3. My mind tried to find rational explanations, but the farmhouse refused. The patterns repeated too deliberately, the movements too intelligent, as though the house had a consciousness, a memory, and it knew I was intruding. The journals I found tucked away in the attic, yellowed and brittle, told me fragments of the history I hadn't yet pieced together. A recluse recluse had lived here decades before, obsessed with spirits, with listening, with waiting. He scratched warnings into the floors, etched symbols into the walls. One line caught my eye. They don't like strangers. I questioned my sanity. Was it the wind, the floors, the isolation, or something else entirely? Something that had been waiting for someone like me? I tried to convince myself to leave, to walk back down the overgrown path, to forget that I had ever set foot in this place. But curiosity, or perhaps terror, kept me here. By the end of the first week, the house had begun to dictate my days. I woke at odd hours, compelled to check the stairs, the doors, the shadows. I could feel the presence in the upstairs rooms, a slow, deliberate pacing that refused to stop. Each night, the sound came closer, the thump heavier, as though whatever haunted this house was testing me, counting me, learning me. I told myself I was imagining it. That exhaustion and isolation played tricks on my mind. Yet small things, unexplainable, precise, deliberate, continued to remind me that I was not alone. The farmhouse was alive in a way I could feel in my chest, in the tension curling along my spine, and I understood, with a rising, cold certainty, the second story was not just above me. It was watching me, waiting for me to notice, waiting for me to make the mistake of stepping into its space. I had crossed the threshold. The house had already chosen me. The farmhouse seemed to breathe around me now. Every floorboard groaned under my weight, but the sound was different, intentional, almost mocking. The shadows in the corners of rooms moved with a slow, deliberate patience, as if they were studying me, cataloging my every gesture. I tried to convince myself it was fatigue or imagination, but the evidence mounted too quickly to ignore. Voices began to whisper. Soft at first, barely distinguishable over the wind's howl. Sometimes it was my name, almost tender, almost pleading. Other times a single word. Jagged and commanding, leave. I froze, flashlight in hand, listening to the echoes in the hollow rooms. I found scraps of old newspapers and journals tucked beneath floorboards, in cracks behind cupboards, in attic corners where dust had settled thick enough to smother a small creature. One journal belonged to a man named Samuel Craven who had lived here decades before. The entries were obsessive, rambling, filled with tales of shadows that moved independently, of whispers that spoke truths the living could not hear. They watch, always. One entry read, "The house remembers the trespassers." The floorboards echo more than sound. They echo your fear. I shivered as I read it. Fear was precisely what the house thrived on. I was beginning to understand that the noises upstairs, the pacing, the shadows, it was a sentient pattern, reacting, adapting to me. I realized that leaving was no longer a choice. I had entered its orbit, and it was patient. It was patient enough to wait me out. Nightfall became unbearable. The pacing above never ceased. Sometimes the steps quickened, then slowed, then paused, as though measuring my pulse, my resolve. I tried recording it, but playback yielded only static and faint, unintelligible whispers, layered, echoing, and unnerving. Listening back, it was as though the house spoke directly to me, through the recording, through my very perception of reality. I started noticing subtle changes in the house itself. A door I had locked in the morning would be cracked open by night. The chair in the living room, which I had set straight, would be slightly angled. Once, a book I had placed on a shelf was on the floor, pages splayed open, words facing me. And always, the pacing. I tried to speak to the entity, reasoning as I might to a person. "Who's there? What do you want?" My voice sounded hollow in the empty room. The response came as a whisper from the shadows above. Home. That single word sent a shiver down my spine. Home? The house itself considered me an intruder, and yet it called itself home. Isolation gnawed at my mind. I had no one to speak to, no way to verify my sanity. Mrs. Weller, the neighbor who lived a mile down the road, had warned me once when I first mentioned the farmhouse. "You shouldn't stay there. People leave, not because they want to, but because the house..." Her voice trailed, eyes flicking downward. "The house takes what it wants. Sometimes it waits years for it." I had laughed then. Superstitions of an old woman? Now her words haunted me like prophecy. I began to see the patterns she had implied. The farmhouse had memory. It remembered every touch, every step, every trespasser, and it was patient, unrelenting. I started keeping a journal myself. Not for writing, but to document the anomalies. The pacing above, rhythmic, intelligent, Cold drafts in rooms that should have been sealed, scratches along the floors and walls, appearing overnight, whispers, counting, murmuring, always from upstairs, reflections in mirrors delayed, subtle, showing me slightly off, as if I were not alone. One evening, the entity, or the house, escalated its presence. I sat in the living room, trying to focus on the notebook, when a floorboard directly above me groaned loudly, then a pause. Then a slow thump. 1, 2, 3. I stopped writing. My pulse rattled my ribs. I whispered, barely able to breathe. "I know you're there." The answer came in a voice like ice scraping metal. "You see now." I could feel it then. The entity was learning me, my patterns, my fears, my hesitations. Every attempt to escape was anticipated. Every attempt to document or resist was absorbed, noted, and turned back on me. Sleep became impossible. I tried barricading the doors, turning on every light, playing recordings of white noise, anything to drown out the upstairs pacing. None of it worked. Shadows lengthened impossibly, stretching into the corners, shifting with a will of their own. Objects moved with purpose. My pen disappeared from the table, only to be found resting on the windowsill, inches above the floor. One night the whispers became words, clear, deliberate. Alone. Always alone. I felt the house pressing in around me. Even sitting in the center of the living room, I could sense its presence closing in. The walls pulsed, the floor trembled slightly under invisible weight, and the upstairs thump never stopped. I began to hallucinate, or perhaps perceive the figure of someone or something moving just beyond the edge of my vision. I questioned myself constantly. Was it real? Or was the isolation driving me mad? I tried to leave. I packed a bag, walked to the door, and the handle resisted. Not physically, but mentally. It was as if the house itself rejected the notion of my departure. The wind screamed outside, a low keening, almost in protest. I couldn't open the door. Returning inside, defeated, I realized that nothing outside the house mattered anymore. The walls were alive. The floors were alive. And upstairs, whatever was pacing, whatever had claimed this place, it knew me now. I found more remnants of the previous occupant's life in the attic. Jars of blackened candles, old photographs scratched with strange sigils, notebooks full of obsessive notations about listening to the house, communicating with it. One phrase repeated across the pages: they learn, they wait. They are patient beyond reason. A chill ran through me. The farmhouse was sentient, patient, merciless, and it had chosen me. From that moment, paranoia became my constant companion. I could no longer distinguish between reality and the house's influence. Shadows became figures. Floorboards became a counting mechanism. Mirrors reflected not my own image, but a fractured version, one that watched, judged, and mimicked. Conversations with myself grew terse, desperate. It's just a house, just a building. But the thump above contradicted me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even food became a conduit for unease. I would place a plate on the table, leave for a moment, and return to find it slightly moved. A fork in a different position, as if set for someone or something else. A small, chilling revelation came one morning. I discovered the attic door, previously locked, now ajar. Dust swirled like fog, illuminated by a single pale ray of sunlight. On the floorboards, scrawled in the dirt, a message. Closer. I realized with a deep sinking feeling that the entity was not just pacing. It was approaching, watching, testing, waiting for the moment it could strike, or for me to break entirely under its scrutiny. Days blurred into nights. Sleep was a distant memory. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper became evidence of its intelligence. The farmhouse had become a predator, and I unwillingly its prey. I tried to leave again, tried to call someone, anyone. The line was dead. My phone would not work inside these walls. It was as if the house had severed all ties to the outside world, pulling me further into its orbit. I understood at last. This was inevitable. The farmhouse did not chase. It waited, it learned. It consumed sanity slowly, patiently. And upstairs, the sound continued, relentless and measured. One step, pause, another step. Always waiting, always watching, always learning. By the end of the week, I realized I was no longer an intruder. I was a part of the house now, its victim, its observer, its prey. And the pacing above was no longer just a sound. It was a promise. It would not stop. I had no choice but to confront it. The upstairs thumping, pacing, whispering. It had grown unbearable, a physical pressure on my chest. Nights were no longer just sleepless. They were unbearable stretches of terror. Shadows moved on their own, light seemed to bend around corners, and the air had grown thick, cold, and heavy. The farmhouse was no longer a building. It was a living predator, and I was trapped inside its chest. The attic door stood at the end of the landing, pale and foreboding in the weak lamplight from the hallway. Dust swirled in ghostly patterns around its frame. Every instinct screamed to turn away, to run, to escape, but I knew escape was no longer possible. The house had anticipated my fear, measured my hesitation, and now it demanded acknowledgement. I gripped the flashlight, hands slick with sweat, and stepped forward. The floorboards groaned beneath me, each step amplified by the silence. I reached the landing, paused, and listened. The thumping stopped. Silence. A single breath, not mine, hovered at the threshold. Then a whisper, layered and distant yet intimate, curling around my ears. "You shouldn't have come." My voice trembled as I responded. Who are you?" "Home," it hissed. "Always home." I swallowed, heart pounding. The light from the flashlight trembled across the walls, flickering over peeling wallpaper and warped wood. The shadows seemed to move with purpose, gathering in corners, stretching toward me. Every instinct told me to flee, but I could feel the house itself pulling me forward, dragging me toward the attic like a predator guiding its prey into the den. I opened the door. Darkness rolled out like liquid, thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. The steps inside the attic were warped, wider than they should be, impossibly long, as if the space itself had shifted while I wasn't looking. A foul metallic scent clung to the air, mixed with rot and decay. And then I saw it, or something. A figure, or a distortion of shadows, tall, thin, and impossibly still. Its face was hidden, but the presence radiated awareness, intelligence, malice. Every step I took toward it made the air tighten, the floor tremble as if the house itself was assisting it, folding space to isolate me. "Why are you here?" I whispered. "You see now?" The entity breathed. A voice that was everywhere and nowhere at once, layered like many speaking in unison. "The house remembers. You are mine." The attic seemed to stretch, walls breathing in and out, time warping around me. I tried to step back. The door slammed shut behind me. Not physically, but in a way that crushed any sense of escape. Light from the flashlight warped, twisting shadows into shapes that weren't there moments before. I felt a presence behind me, brushing against my mind, my skin, as though it were reading me, learning me, consuming my thoughts. I shouted, desperate, "I'm not yours! I'm leaving!" The response was a whisper into my skull, intimate and terrifying. "You can't leave. You never could." I stumbled back, tripping over warped floorboards. Shadows thickened, forming a mass around me, the air vibrating with low, incessant murmurs. The figure in the corner didn't move, but the room itself seemed alive, walls bending, ceiling lowering, floor undulating. Doors elsewhere slammed, windows rattled. The wind howled inside the house as if the structure were screaming. I tried to focus on reality, grounding myself. My mind raced, the journals, Mrs. Weller's warning, the scraps of history. The house had always been a trap, waiting decades for a victim patient enough to enter. And now it had me. I lunged at the figure, flashlight raised. My beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing. The shadow recoiled as if I had struck it, but the mass of darkness remained, wrapping around the edges of the attic like liquid smoke. My hands trembled uncontrollably. "You think you can fight me?" The whisper was everywhere at once, vibrating through my bones. "I am the house. I am the waiting. I am the memory of every trespasser. You belong to me now." The floorboards shifted, twisted under me. I fell forward, hands gripping the warped wood. A low moan began, a sound that seemed to emanate from the walls, the ceiling, the very foundation. The shadows elongated, clawing along the floor, reaching toward me. My vision blurred. My heart felt like it would burst from my chest, and then the entity spoke again. "You can scream." "I can hear you." I did scream. My voice tore through the darkness, bouncing off warped walls and echoing in impossible ways. The entity didn't flinch. The house itself shivered and seemed to respond to my panic. walls bending inward, attic ceiling lowering to crush, to suffocate. In desperation, I lunged toward the lone window. It wasn't where it should have been, shifted, warped, stretching like a living thing. I grabbed the frame, tugged with all my strength. The glass cracked, but it didn't shatter. It flexed like plastic, bending inward, refusing escape. Behind me, I felt a pressure, a weight that wasn't gravity. The shadows pressed, thick and tangible. I turned, finally confronting it fully. The figure, or mass, shifted, coalesced just enough to show a face. Not human, but vaguely so. Elongated features twisted with malice, a mouth opening impossibly wide in a silent scream. Eyes, if they could be called that, burned with awareness, staring straight into me. "You are mine," it hissed, a chorus of whispers overlapping. "We have waited. And now you belong." I tried to fight with reason, with logic. "I don't belong to this place," I shouted. The attic seemed to explode in sound. Floorboards groaned like breaking bones. Walls shivered, paint flaking as the structure itself convulsed. Time twisted. The space elongated. Shadows reached in impossible directions. The air thickened into viscous waves that pressed against my lungs, making each breath a struggle. I stumbled, tripped, fell to my knees. My flashlight rolled, beam cutting across warped walls, illuminating. Traces of previous victims, scribbled warnings, broken furniture arranged in circles, symbols carved into beams. The house was patient, yes, but it had prepared for this moment, had always prepared. I was simply a final actor in its long play. I screamed again, a raw, broken sound. The figure recoiled, then surged, coalescing into something fully tangible, a dark, writhing mass, taller than the ceiling, stretching impossibly, a living shadow. The whispers became a roar, a cacophony inside my skull. Alone, always, yours, mine. My mind fractured under the assault. I clawed at the walls, at the floor, at the shadows, at the entity itself, but nothing responded. The house had learned me, understood me, and I could not escape its knowledge. In one final, desperate act, I threw myself against the far wall, trying to push through some imagined exit. Pain exploded through my shoulder. The shadow lashed at me, intangible yet crushing, pressing into my mind, my chest. I understood then. The horror wasn't physical. It wasn't about being killed. It was about annihilation of self, erasure of sanity, the complete absorption into the house's memory. The entity didn't need to strike. It merely needed me to understand, to break, to submit. I collapsed to the floor, shaking, sobbing. My mind screamed against the inevitability. Above me the pacing continued, now slower, deliberate, counting down in my chest. 1, 2, 3. I realized I could never leave. I was no longer a visitor. I was part of the house now, another memory for it to consume, another presence to study, another whisper in the dark for future trespassers. The shadows gathered around me, rising like smoke. The figure loomed, watching, patient, eternal. My voice caught in my throat as I whispered one final plea. "Please, just let me go." The entity did not respond. Silence fell, not gentle, not forgiving, but complete, absolute, suffocating. And in that silence I understood. I had lost. The house had won. And upstairs the pacing continued. I woke, or perhaps I didn't. Time had lost all meaning. The farmhouse was quiet now, but the quiet was wrong. Thick, heavy, a silence that pressed against my skull, echoing the events of the night before. I could still feel it in the walls, in the floor, in the shadows clinging to the corners of rooms. It had not moved on. It never moved on. I sat in the living room staring at the warped floorboards. Each groan of wood beneath my weight reminded me of what had happened upstairs. The pacing had stopped, but not the awareness. The house still watched, still remembered. I felt its presence deep inside me, like a seed planted in my mind, growing silently, waiting. When I stepped outside, the fog hugged the earth, twisting around the broken barn and leaning silo. I thought about walking away, leaving it behind. But even in the pale morning light, I knew the farmhouse had followed me in some way I could not see or touch. Its memory lingered in my chest, tightening with each heartbeat. I tried to call someone, anyone. My phone buzzed once and died. No signal, no connection. I realized then that my isolation had not ended with the night. It had only begun. The farmhouse had extended its reach beyond walls, beyond floors, beyond the threshold. It had invaded the part of me that mattered, the part that feared, that doubted, that remembered. Sleep was impossible. Every creak in my apartment, every shadow in the corner of my vision made me flinch. The pacing had imprinted itself in my mind, a rhythm I could not escape. 1, 2, 3. Even when I closed my eyes, I saw the attic, the dark figure, the shifting shadows. I could not unsee it. I could not forget. I began keeping a journal, though writing it offered no relief. I recorded dreams where I returned to the farmhouse. Doors stretched impossibly. Ceilings loomed. Shadows reached for me. Voices whispered my name, faintly, urgently. Sometimes I would wake and see the handwriting on my own pages shift, as if the house itself had touched them. People noticed. Friends commented on my hollow eyes, the slow tremor in my hands, the way I flinched at sudden noises. I laughed it off, told myself it was stress, fatigue, the weight of city life. But I knew better. The farmhouse had left its mark. Not a scar visible to the eye, but a presence I carried within. I had been claimed. Occasionally I returned to the outskirts of town, drawn by a compulsion I cannot explain. From the road, I can see the farmhouse, ivy-clad and silent, windows like hollow eyes. It appears empty, harmless, decayed, but I know it is not. It waits, it always waits, and I know deep in my chest that it remembers me. Every heartbeat I take is catalogued, every shiver noted. I have tried to forget. I have tried to rationalize, to distance myself from what happened. I tell myself it was exhaustion, isolation, a psychotic break. But the dreams betray me. The whispers in the dark, the shadows in corners, the sense of being followed, even in a crowded subway or a sunlit street, remind me of the truth. I am changed. I no longer feel safe in any space. Familiar places warp subtly under my gaze. Mirrors hesitate, reflections lag. Doors seem to shift slightly, corridors lengthen in impossible ways. Even a friend's apartment, no more than a few blocks from my own, feels slightly alien. The house has taught me that space itself can lie, that reality can bend, that horror is inevitable. Sometimes I speak aloud, quietly, to anchor myself. It's gone. It's behind me. I'm safe, but the words taste false. The pacing remains, echoing faintly in my mind, a rhythm I cannot silence. 1, 2, 3. I have dreams of the attic. The dark figure waits, always patient, always watching. I cannot confront it anymore. I have nothing left to give. I wake in cold sweats, a chill lingering long after I am upright, my chest tight, heartbeat echoing the memory of what I endured. And yet, sometimes I feel the pull, a curiosity, a compulsion to return. Not because I want to, but because the farmhouse calls to those who have entered its orbit. It waits for the next moment, the next trespasser, and I am now part of its cycle. I carry its presence with me, like a shadow stitched into my very being. I have tried to warn others, to tell them do not enter. But who would listen? Who would believe? It is impossible to describe a horror that is felt rather than seen, a presence that cannot be captured, a sentience in wood and shadow. My words are inadequate. The only truth I can convey is the lingering dread, the suffocating inevitability, the inescapable knowledge that it exists. I walk the streets, trying to appear normal, trying to occupy ordinary spaces. But even there I sense it, in the slight creak of a floorboard beneath someone's foot, in the flicker of light across a wall, in the quiet breath of a room at night. The house has not left me. It cannot. I carry it now. It is part of me, and I am part of it. I have learned finally what the journals meant. What Mrs. Weller tried to tell me. The house does not kill. It does not chase. It waits. It observes. It teaches patience and fear. And eventually, it claims those who cross its threshold in ways both subtle and complete. I no longer dream of escape. The thought itself is exhausting, hopeless. I have accepted it, though acceptance is no comfort. The entity upstairs, the presence in the walls, the echoes in the floorboards, they are a permanent imprint on my mind, a reminder that some places cannot be left behind. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it again. Not in the house, I am far away, but in my apartment, in my bedroom, faint as a heartbeat, measured as a step. I freeze, every nerve alight, and I know it is still with me. It always will be. The final lesson is simple and terrifying. Horror is not about what you see. It is about what lingers. It is about the inevitability of being claimed, of being remembered. I live my days hollow, carrying its memory in every thought, in every glance over my shoulder. And at night, when the world is quiet, I hear it again, soft, deliberate, patient. 1, 2, 3. I have survived the farmhouse. But I am not free. I will never be free. The house has taught me its patience, and its reach is eternal. And somewhere, upstairs, it waits for the next person who dares to enter. And I know with an icy certainty that someday someone else will hear the pacing. Someone else will hear the whisper, down. And I will know, as I have always known, that the horror is inevitable.